weeks ago started a series on messages on church. We're going to bypass that today, get back to it next week. Kind of figured that wouldn't be many of us here today. But thankful for the ones that are here. Psalm 12, we'll read the first 8 verses. Help, Lord, where the godly man ceaseth, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. They speak vanity, every one with his neighbor. With flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaketh proud things. Who said, with our tongue will we prevail, our lips our own, who is Lord over us. For the oppression of the poor, for the sign of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. The wicked walk on every side, when the vilest men are exalted. This, of course, is a psalm of David. And though there is nothing in the psalm indicating its exact time frame, it no doubt is at some point in Saul's reign and persecution of David. But whenever it was written, it most certainly is a panoramic view of today and is therefore pertinent to our present day. The 12th Psalm is a pictorial of Psalm 11 verse 3. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And the answer to that question is in the first 2 words of Psalm 12. Help, Lord. That's what the righteous can do. Cry out to God for help. So in this 12th Psalm, David is overwhelmed at what was going on around him. And he seems to be lamenting over the growing corruption of his day. And in this 12th Psalm, we see a child of God in a declining and crumbling society. And he serves as an example to us. All through the psalm, there is a picture of the continuing and overrunning nature of sin. There is in the psalm great encouragement for the child of God. It is a psalm that begins with a sense of urgency. Help. And though by the time you get to the end of the psalm, verse 8, the adverse circumstances have not changed. But David did find confidence. He did find rest and peace and strength in the midst of such. And we, like David, live in the times described in this psalm. And thanks be to God, we, like David, can have confidence, rest, peace, and strength in such times. I want to speak on God's help in a time of ongoing spiritual decline and extinction. So let's consider first of all the situation that the psalmist was in. Again, the psalm begins with David making a passionate and fervent plea. Help, Lord. And just reading those two words, you can feel the passion, you can feel the urgency of those words. The implications of help, Lord, are many. They paint a very vivid picture. They paint a picture of need. Help, Lord. There's a need. They paint a picture of danger. They paint a picture of difficulty. They paint a picture of a predicament. A picture of misery. A picture of a crisis. A picture of an emergency. A picture of helplessness. Help, Lord, is a picture of urgency. So David not only felt the situation to be very pressing and to be very dire and critical, but he feels the reality of the situation. And beginning in verse 1, he begins to describe the situation. He says, help, Lord, for, or because. And then he goes on to state several things about the situation that he was in. It was a time of great loss. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth. This is where David begins. He begins with the godly man and the fact that the godly man is ceasing. The godly man ceaseth. That's a problem. But it's not a problem beyond the Lord, as indicated by those two words. Help, Lord. The seriousness and the urgency of the problem is seen in who and what the godly man is. The godly man is one who has godlike characteristics. It is one who imitates God. One who is devoted to God. Has a consciousness of God. Has a reverence and respect for God. His heart is occupied with God. He's sensitive toward God. He's responsive to God. He's submissive to God. He's obedient to God. And the godly man ceaseth. The godly man is a lover of God. The godly man is a worshiper of God. The godly man is one who is habitually right with God. And this godly man ceaseth. He's becoming extinct. There's a decline. The godly man is a spiritual man. The opposite of carnality. The godly man is one in whom God has left an impression upon. The touch of God is upon his life. And his life is a manifestation and an expression of God. And David says, the godly man ceaseth. Notice it does not say, the godly man has ceased. It doesn't say that. It says, the godly man ceaseth. So something was happening He's speaking of something that is happening, something that was ongoing. The godly man ceaseth, meaning coming to an end. There's going to be a discontinuance, a breaking off. And this was happening in a continuous way. And then notice also, this is why he needs the Lord's help. For the faithful fail from among the children of men. The faithful are those who are constantly and consistently loyal and true to God. Those who are committed to God. Those who are unwavering. The faithful are becoming less and less. So what do churches do today? They just redefine faithful to make themselves feel good. But the reason the faithful fail is because the influence of godliness within them is ceasing. So we hear David say the faithful fail, meaning they're disappearing. They're vanishing. They're becoming less and less. And again, this is present tense. It's an ongoing situation. So David says, help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. So when David looked around, and wherever David went, he could not help but notice that the godly man and the faithful man were rare. It was a rarity. It reads, the godly man ceaseth, the faithful fail from among the children of men. The godly and the faithful were becoming less and less. The godly and the faithful, it's like they were becoming extinct. They don't, of course. God will always have a godly remnant and a faithful remnant. But wherever this is so, the godly man ceaseth, the faithful fail. And whether it be so through death or willful departure, defection, whatever the case, the loss is immeasurable. The loss is immeasurable. The church has lost much by the godly man dying and the faithful dying. It's a great loss. And most of the time, that loss isn't replaced. The godly man ceaseth, the faithful fail from among the children of men, is the lessening of spiritual consistency. There was a spiritual decline. And as a result, there were other problems. When the godly cease, when the faithful fail, the problem doesn't stop there. It creates other problems. And he addresses this in verses 2 through 4. It was a time of manifest degeneracy. The godly and the faithful were becoming more and more of a rarity. And what David says in verses 2 through 4 was becoming more and more common. Becoming more and more the norm. Notice, they speak vanity. They speak vanity. Every one with his neighbor. As the godly cease and the faithful fail, as they become less and less, the babble of empty speech becomes more and more. Everywhere David turned, there was the babble of empty speech. foolish speech, useless, pointless, having no real purpose, without profit. They loved to talk about it. They loved to talk about vanity. They loved to hear about it. Everywhere was the chatter of the carnal. And while the godly and the faithful were becoming more and more of a rarity, this vain speech was becoming more and more common, becoming more and more the norm. Notice also, with flattering lips do they speak. Again, while the godly and the faithful are becoming more and more of a rarity, this is becoming more and more common, more and more the norm. Notice also, with a double heart do they speak. And while the godly and the faithful were becoming more and more of a rarity, this was becoming more and more common. In verse 3, there's the tongue that speaketh proud things, self-importance, self-admiration, self-honor, self-pleasure, self-satisfaction, self-adulation. Godliness and faithfulness had all but disappeared. But everywhere was this self-absorption and obsession. And in verse 4 we see everywhere was boasting and arrogance, a spirit of self-confidence, self-authority, self-sufficiency, a spirit of lawlessness, a spirit of rejection and defiance of God and His ways. Beg help, Lord. The godly man ceaseth. It was also a time of oppression, verse 5, for the oppression of the poor. This speaks of persecution, tyranny, and injustice, the taking advantage of others, preying upon others. All of this for self-gain. Notice also, puffeth at him. Speaking of their view and treatment of others based upon the feeling of self-importance and self-regard and self-arrogance. Also notice verse 5, there was sighing. It is, there was a time of grieving and lamentation, a time of longing. And again, while the godly and the faithful were becoming more and more of a rarity, this was becoming more and more common, more and more the norm. It was also a time of unholy boldness. In verse 8, the wicked, it is the evil, the immoral, the vile, the erring, the abominable, the hateful, the illicit, the lawless, the wicked walk, they strut, they parade on every side. It speaks of the extent of this wickedness. It speaks of the fact that it was rampant, that it was pervasive. It speaks of wickedness becoming common, wickedness becoming the norm. So it is. The godly man ceaseth. The faithful fail from among the children of men. And the wicked strut and parade on every side. Notice again, every side. David is feeling like he's surrounded by the devilish, surrounded by evil, surrounded by immoral, surrounded by the corrupt, surrounded by the lawless, and the crooked, and the shocking. Notice also, when the vilest men, speaking of the highest degree of the abominable and the offensive are exalted. That is, they're elevated. They are thought to be illustrious and esteemed. And so it is when the godly man ceaseth, and the faithful fail from among the children of men. And while the godly and the faithful were becoming more and more of a rarity, this was becoming more and more common and the norm. So in the psalm, David is describing a time when all appears to be crumbling and collapsing around him. He is describing a time of deterioration and rot, a time of vanishing godliness, vanishing faithfulness, times of rapid advancement, and the proliferation of self. And here we are, in a world, a society, and a culture submerged in wickedness. And when godliness and faithfulness are very sparse. Now, since the fall, godliness and faithfulness is far less than the wicked. It's not just today. But in this 12th Psalm, we find encouragement for such times. The problem with many today is the godly man ceaseth. And people throw up their hands and say, well, what's use? Well, now you've ceased also. The faithful fail. Well, what's the use? If we allowed the failures of God's people to keep us from serving God, I wouldn't have served the Lord for more than a couple days. It's always going to be the case. But there's encouragement. We find encouragement from David's reaction. David was affected. David was impacted by the times he was in. But he cried out, "Help, Lord!" The cry reveals many things. It reveals that David was very much aware of the situation around him. It's what a lot of people do today. Well, I'll just pretend it's not there. Well, you go ahead and do that. It doesn't change anything. I'll just stick my head in the sand. David didn't do that. David feels his environment. He wasn't oblivious to his environment. And he prays, "Help, Lord." He personally felt the situation. And obviously the situation greatly pained him. "Help, Lord." It indicates that not only did David feel the danger that was around him, but he also felt his own weakness. And that's why he prays, "Help, Lord." Not only that, I believe he felt his own proneness. The godly man is ceasing. And David is very prone to do the same thing. The faithful fail. And David felt a proneness to that as well. Help, Lord. David's not just praying for that God would help the situation. I don't believe that's it at all. He's praying for personal help. Help, Lord. David was so affected, so impacted by what was around him that he moved in the direction of God. We will be impacted, affected by what's around us. And you can only go in one of two directions. You either go in the direction of everything around you, or you move in the direction of God. So David looked at his times, the difficulties, the battles. He looks at who was sitting upon the throne. Again, I believe Saul was probably reigning at the time. He looks at the attacks from the enemies. He doesn't get stuck with who's on the throne. He doesn't get stuck with his enemies, but he cries out to God. Help, Lord. That was David's reaction to evil. When we see evil all around us, what is our reaction? Our reaction ought to be to move in the direction of God and cry out for His help. That was his reaction to the difficult and trying times that he was in. Help, Lord. The word help has several implications. To help is to give assistance, to give aid. And there is such a thing as God assistance and the aid of God. The word help means to relieve, to cure. And there is relief and cure in God. The word help means to avail. The word help can mean to prevent. You prevent something. It can mean to remedy. And there is God remedy. There's God remedy for everything. There's God remedy for every situation. And if we believe that, then we will move in the direction of God and cry, help, Lord. The word help means that you enable someone. And there is God enablement. The word help means to deliver. And there is God deliverance. To help is to supply or to furnish. And there is God provision. The word help means to protect, to prevent. And there is God protection. The word help can mean instruction and guidance. And there is God instruction and guidance. The word help can mean to intervene. And there is God intervention. Help, Lord. We've already seen it was a time of ongoing spiritual decline. A lessening of a godly and faithful consistency. But there was help in God. Here's how it works today in most of the Lord's churches. You have a group of people, the older ones. They can remember a time when it appeared that there were more godly and faithful. And they can say with the psalmist, the godly ceaseth, the faithful fail. It doesn't seem like there's as many as there once was. And they can see that. How do you react to it? Well, most of them, all they do is sit there and lament. Well, it's not like it used to be. That's how it was in Ezra's day. Then you have a younger group, they haven't known any different. This is the norm. But our reaction ought to be, help, Lord. Help. Help, Lord. It is declared in Psalm 46:1, God is a very present help in trouble. A very present help. That simply means God is more present than the trouble. That's always so. There's no trouble more present than God. There's no difficulty more present than God. It means that God is more of a reality than the trouble. There were issues, no doubt, as David looked around, that greatly concerned him. Issues that greatly concerned him. I'll never forget, this goes back to the 90s. Brother Eugene Clark preached a message, the Elkton Conference. It was basically like a farewell message. I still to this day think it's one of the best messages I've ever heard in my life. But he spoke on things that concern me about the Lord's churches and God's men. And it was prophetic. And almost everybody got angry and upset. In fact, I had one preacher call me after I'd gotten home, and he said, I heard Brother Clark really got in the flesh. I said, well, you heard wrong. He spoke the truth, and people didn't like it. And that's just how it is. David looked around and he saw things that greatly concerned him. But he also realized that these issues, the things that concerned him, were beyond the ability of man. And if they were going to be truly fixed, it would have to be God's way. It would have to be God that does it. That's still true today. So therefore, help, Lord. Help, Lord. This plea reveals the direction of David's heart. Again, you're surrounded by trouble. The trouble really isn't the danger. The danger is what direction your heart goes in. If it goes in the wrong direction. David was not oblivious. He was not insensible. He was not indifferent to the situation that surrounded him. But his plea, help, Lord, reveals where his attention was, where his dependence was. And here we are. And after I'm gone, and after some of you are gone, it'll continue to be a time of spiritual decline, because that's how it's been since the fall. A time when spiritual consistency is waning. But we can have a right direction of heart. Help, Lord. The psalm begins with this heartfelt cry. Help, Lord. David, no doubt, has a desire to remain godly and faithful. So he cries out, help, Lord. I think he's pleading here that God help him personally. That God help him personally. It is, God, here I am, surrounded by wickedness. And the godly and the faithful seem to be vanishing. Help me. Help me to be like you. Help me to imitate you in the midst of this wicked mess. Here am I surrounded by wickedness and a society of self. Help me, God, to be more conscious of you, to be more occupied with you and less occupied with myself. Help me, lest I become them. And we all need to feel that danger. We all need to feel that proneness. Oh, I'll never fall. You'll be the next one that falls if you maintain that attitude. Help me to become more conscious of you. Help me to become more occupied with you. Help me to be less occupied with myself. Help me to have more reverence for you. Help, Lord, the godly man ceaseth. If we're not becoming more godly, we're ceasing. We're ceasing. David had a desire in a time of waning spirituality to be one who continued to walk with God. One who continued to live for God. One who continued to serve God where God placed him. He was not using the times as an excuse. Well, it's the times we live in. Help, Lord! Help. It's the cry of one who desired to have the touch of God upon his life. One who desired to get up every day and live for God. All of this shows that even in times of ongoing spiritual decline and distinction, we can still have a right desire of heart for God. Then notice, in these troublesome times, there is access to God. The very plea, help, Lord, reveals that there is sovereign God to turn to. He's turning to God. God is accessible to him. We have access to omnipotence. We have access to omniscience. It may be so that the godly man ceaseth. It may be so that the faithful fail from among the children of men. But there is God. And we have access to him. It may be so that the godly man ceaseth, and the faithful fail from among the children of men. But our faith is not in the godliness of man. Our faith is not in the faithfulness of man. Our faith is in a sovereign God. Be careful where you place your faith. Then there's confidence in God. Notice verse 3. The Lord shall. The Lord shall. David knew that the situation would come to an end in God's time. The Lord shall. And then he says, the Lord shall cut off. Which is indicative of the fact that David knew God's in control. People say that all the time. Well, God's in control. But they don't believe it. Well, how do you know they don't believe it? Because their life don't manifest it. Their life manifests just the opposite. He knew that God was greater than the situation. This is the confidence that God is able. God is able. God can. In times of ongoing spiritual decline and extinction, we can have absolute, unwavering confidence in God. The godly man ceaseth. When a godly person leaves this life, a child of God whose heart is right with God will pray, "Help me, Lord, to fill the gap. Help me, Lord, to stand in the gap." And then there's God revealing Himself. Notice verse 5. "For the oppression of the poor, for the sign of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord." God speaks. And He speaks in response to David. And He speaks to David. In times of ongoing spiritual decline, God is not silenced. God is not silenced. Preacher may die, his voice has been silenced. God is not silenced. In these days, a faithful man of God can die, but being dead he yet speaketh. Because of technology, he being dead yet speaketh. Which is just a manifestation that God is not silenced. God has something to say. Perhaps the godly man ceaseth and the faithful fail. God has something to say to His people. Something to say concerning Himself. He says, "I will. I will. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him." In times of ongoing spiritual decline, God promises His people. There's no need for any child of God to be discouraged. Now, if God ceaseth, you can be discouraged. But that's not going to happen. There is the care and there is the protection of the Lord for His own. He says, "I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him." I will. I will. Notice verse 6, there's the Word of God. Verse 7, there's the assurance in the faithfulness of God. God is faithful. The faithful fail from among the children of men. But God is faithful. God is faithful. Coming to the last verse of the psalm, the circumstances surrounding David had not changed. But I believe that David found rest. And David found strength in God and His Word. When we cry, "Help, Lord," if all you have in mind is your circumstances, you're not praying right anyway. God may not change the circumstances. Where we need help is ourselves. Help me, Lord. The godly man ceaseth, the faithful fail from among the children of men. And we too can find rest and strength in the Lord. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us